A bye week for the Jaguars mean they have a chance to make some assessments for the future. I'll tell you who I'm talking about and what in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On. You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for tagging along and joining me for another edition of Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. I am your host, Tony Wiggins, covering this team for over a dozen years now, and it's been a lot of the same thing, but we won't bring you the same thing here every day, even though it's your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. And a reminder, we're free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe and follow along, and on the YouTube page as well. Today's episode of Locked On Jaguars is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 and promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. I hope you're locked in, man. It's the bye week. Jaguars obviously lost 27-17 to the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. Semi-competitive. They had their moments. They had their opportunities. Not good enough to miss any of those opportunities, and they missed a boatload of them. So they came home with another with another L, and they're 3-7 on the season. So that's 10 weeks in. They have a bye week this week. It's 7 games left, unless they're going to go on a miraculous 7-game winning streak. We can forget about the playoffs. And so I'm just telling you, we can forget about the playoffs. They ain't going on no 7-game winning streak. The other thing is we've been real hesitant because they've been so competitive to start thinking about the future, right? And not necessarily free agency and the draft in itself. But before you start trying to figure out about those things, before you can even ask yourself a question of, what do they need to do here and what do they need to do there and who's going to be available, where they're picking and all that stuff, the first thing you have to do is assess what you have. Yeah, I call it taking inventory. So for the rest of this week, what we're going to do is we're going to take inventory of the team. I'm not going to try to speedball it into one because they don't have a matchup this week. This is a good time to do it. I'm not going to speedball everything into one episode. I'm going to break it down. Today we're going to look at one of the parts of the team that was thought to be a strength, and that was the defensive line, and that's going to include the edge rushers. And it turns out it's not a strength. It's been very, very, very disappointing, if you ask me. So we really have to take a hard look at it. And I'm sitting here, y'all thinking, why are you hesitating? Because I'm really, really trying to be measured and concentrated as to what I'm actually trying to tell you guys we're going to do. We're not going to give up on the season in terms of hoping that they make progress, because it's not a lost cause if they make progress. They weren't going to go from having the number one pick in the draft to all of a sudden just being a team that was going to win the Super Bowl. But we left room that they could overachieve because they had underachieved in the past, and that some of the ways that this team has gone about the last 2 years of spending money. Remember, they were the team with the most salary cap space and the number 1 overall pick. They picked Trevor Lawrence, and in 2 years, it looks like they might be in cap hell, but they don't have a whole lot to show for it. So I warn people, they're going to find cap space. Everybody does. The Saints been over the cap for 10 years, and they keep finding cap space and keep paying people a bunch of money. So, while that's not real, it is going to take some maneuvering. It's going to take some tough decisions. They may have to extend someone, and they may have to give people bonus money And those guys might not be very good. So those are the things what I mean about taking inventory. We're going to take a hard look at. So before you can decide what you're going to do, how you're going to proceed, what's out there, you got to decide what you got first, right? If you're going to cook a pot of gumbo, you better look in that pantry to see what you have so you'll know what you need to go get. And with this defensive front, there's some perplexing things that we have to discuss. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of silver lining in segment 3. But right off the top of my head, it's going to be this going to have to be some difficult decisions made. The first difficult decision is, well, there's two of them. One, are you going to stick with the person who has been making a lot of the personnel decisions over the last 2 years, and that's Trent Baalke? Do you trust him to fix what is broken? And I'm going to tell you, it is broken. Once you see how I break this down and tell you about this when we take our inventory and the problems that you have, everybody's going to understand exactly what I mean by, are you going to trust Trent Baalke to fix it? It's going to be, it's going to be a super interesting question. I'm going to pull some salary cap stuff up for you here to show you how difficult it's going to be for the Jaguars, not necessarily to create cap space, but to create a situation where it's going to be smart and frugal for them to be able to help themselves in this particular area based on what they've spent in the past and the draft capital that has been invested in this certain position. So we're going to get to all of that stuff. I'm going to tell you who disappointed me. I'm going to tell you who I'm more patient with. And like I said, just to recap, the reason that I find it necessary for us to move in this direction and to start doing this is because they don't have an opponent this week. We can talk ad nauseum about the losses and about how close they've been. We can talk about the one or two positives, and we'll get to them this week too. But right now, we're doing some housekeeping, and we're going to take a little bit of inventory, and it's going to hurt a little bit. All right, but before we do that, I have to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Total Wine and More. This holiday, find out what you love at Total Wine and More with so many great bottles to choose from. It's easy to find a new favorite single barrel bourbon or the perfect gifts for everyone on your list with some help from a friendly guide. And all with the confidence of knowing you found something special for the lowest price. Find what you love what you find only at Total Wine and More. Curbside and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly. You better be 21. I love the international feel. There's something for everyone in there. So make sure you check out Total Wine and More. My family does it. You need to do it too. And safely and responsibly enjoy the holiday. All right, man, rolling along here. Locked On Jaguars. It's the inventory. You've been to the grocery store and they have some outsourced people in there with these little guns and they're taking inventory while you're trying to shop and they're all in your way. Well, I'm about to get in your way because we're about to take some inventory on what this team is and what they don't have. And the first stop is going to be the stop that I bragged about in the offseason and that I thought would be a strength of this team. And for the first 3 weeks it was, and that's the front, the defensive front along with the edge rushers. This was supposed to be a strength. You saw them in training camp. They were bigger and longer, wider, just appeared to be more physical than they had been in the past. I was impressed by the length that I saw, the girth that I saw in the middle, and the fact that guys who had been first line starters were now competing to make sure they could even get reps because of all the additions. Drafting Trayvon Walker with the first overall pick. They had Josh Allen. They made a move on the 5th-year option with Josh Allen. They still had DeJuan Smoot. They signed Arden Key as a depth piece. They cut, but then brought back Adam Gostis, who I thought was extremely, extremely productive as a role player. They had Devon Hamilton, who I believe was on the verge of being a superstar. And then they signed Fadu Kasi, who I didn't know a whole lot about when they signed him. And then I did some research and found out that he was a big, burly, productive player. And I was like, they finally got somebody to line up next to Devon Hamilton. And then on cut downs, when they start trimming the roster down, some of the stuff that I thought that they had, some of the advantages I thought they had, I thought they sort of got rid of it. And we discussed ad nauseum about the fact that they let go of Malcolm Brown, and then they cut all the other 315, 320-pound people. So with the way they run their offense, they run a three-man front. They're multiple. They run a three-man front until they get in the nickel. And when they get in the nickel, they run a four-man front with two edge rushers on the end, bigger edge rushers in the middle, and sometimes four edge rushers at a time. But their base defense consists of Roy Robinson Harris at 3 technique, and then the two Devon Hamilton and Fadu Kasi, either one at nose tackle and the other at defensive end, but yet still two side-by-side 300-pounders. My issue is I said that the second that they got an injury or the second that one of those guys got tired, they were not going to be able to be in their base with the same size because they only had two guys that were 315, 320-pounders. And what happened? Lorenzo Fadu Kasi has an injury to his quad that bothers him early in the year. It really, really started bothering him in the Philadelphia game. And that's the game where it seems like the covers came off of the Jaguars because over the first 3 weeks, the Jaguars defensive line looked exactly like we thought it was going to look, right? But then I had a phone call with someone who coached in the league before and who is currently working in the league, but not in a whistleblowing capacity, that told me, Wig, it looks good right now, but after week 3, this is where teams start getting a real good beat on you because there's enough tape, there's a big enough sample size that they know what you can do and what you can't do. And ever since that person told me that, Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker have not looked the same. Let's start with the rookie. Still like him. Still feel like he can be a really, really good player. He has to use this offseason to develop some moves and disengage. During the season isn't where you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to be able to use right away. And you see it. Now, in the last game, he was held at least twice. I mean, 3 times. I saw him almost get to Patrick Mahomes, and I saw a guy holding him while he was, and the referee wouldn't call it. Because to me, a holding penalty is almost just as good as a sack because it's 10 yards from the original line of scrimmage, so it goes backwards. And it creates long down and distance situations. The only difference is obviously you're not losing. It's not a loss of down. But they also were helping out and chipping with the linebacker, with the running back and the tight end. So I'm not going to totally jump all over him. And the reason why I won't do that also is because he's a rookie. We expected this curve. Some people said he'd get to 6 sacks. I think he's sitting at 3.5 now with 7 games to go. He may find himself at 6 sacks. He's played the run very well. I think they've been a little too vanilla and just basically they're showing exactly what he's going to do. They're just having him take a running start. And really right now his biggest move is the bull rush and the long arm, and I think he's going to have to develop more than that. The inventory for me says it's too early to say anything one way or another, but obviously he's a good enough player and he does enough other things that you can say we can deal with that. Josh Allen is a whole nother story. It's because this is the 4th year with this. After a very good rookie year, then he didn't have any help or he was injured. The things that I'm seeing ain't about help. The things that I'm seeing is he's just not going around people with one-on-one. And then he was getting a lot of pressure early and he just wasn't finishing. He's just not a dude, I believe, that you sign long-term and think that you're going to be okay, especially when you have someone who has a learning curve on the other side. The issue is he's on a fifth-year option, and if they sign him to a long-term deal after they drafted Trayvon number 1 overall, well, that's who y'all riding with. And it'd be foolish to think that you're going to go in the draft or free agency. You're going to upgrade. I mean, you're going to add people. You're going to always be able to, you can never have as much rush. But this league does not allow you to spend too much money or resources on one singular position. Doesn't work that way. You have to allocate those funds and spread it out over the entire team. You can't have your 3 highest paid players on defense all play the same position, and you're only playing them 2 at a time. That does not make sense. No one I know thinks it makes any sense. I do think they need more pass rush. I think it's a desperate situation, but I'm also understanding that the man that made the decision to draft Trayvon, which I would have done, is also the guy that has to make the decision to not sign Josh Allen to a long-term deal, because if he does, he doesn't leave himself a whole bunch of room to improve, and that's Trent Baalke. The depth might start to diminish a little bit because Dawon Smoot has played himself into the consciousness of folks around the league. And to retain him, it might cost Jacksonville more than they are able to spend, only because, once again, you cannot continue to allocate all of these funds to one position, even though Smoot moves around a little bit. Roy Robertson-Harris is still on the books for about $7 million next year. He was named the captain going into KC, so that means somebody must love him. I ain't overly impressed. Devon Hamilton is under contract for 1 more year. Good thing you ain't got to decide whether you got to pay him, because Fadu Kasi has not been worth all of that money that they're paying him, and he has about $16 million in dead money on his deal next year, with like a $14 million salary cap hit in terms of his salary for next year, his base. Arden Key has definitely probably earned enough to get a look from around the league and go to a contender and get a little bit of a pay raise. And I don't know if the Jags can afford to do that all over again, even though if I was him, I'd ask for more than they gave me last year. So now you see the dilemma. They have a lot of funds and a lot of resources allocated to this position and some decisions that they have to make. And if they let some guys go, they got to draft some other people, maybe starting around the 3rd round, the way the Cowboys do. Go look at all those dudes the Cowboys got, whether it's Sam Williams, it's the kid they got from Kansas State a few years ago, Torrance. They're all playing well. You have to hit on some of these guys late. They need Jordan Smith to be able to come back from an injury, and he was very, very raw, but I've seen him. He's big, he's strong, he's 6'7", 260 pounds. They need him to be able to show up to training camp, and they got to get some production from him. I'm going to go through the interior guys and try to give you a little bit of silver lining, just a little, because I know it sounds like I don't have a whole bunch right now, but I'll do that the 3rd and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show and episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is your daily fantasy game. It's my favorite. It's the only one I play. It's the only one you need to play. Here's what it is. It's daily fantasy. What happens is PrizePicks takes certain entries, those are players, and they give those players projections, which is based on production. You, as the user, have to decide if it's more or less. That's right, more or less. Now, you have to pick at least 2 entries. And if you pick at least 2 entries, you can go up to 5 entries. You might have a chance to win 10 times your money if you get them all right. Or you can take the flex option, which pays you not quite that much, but you can miss 1 or 2 and still get an actual payout. Go to prizepicks.com or get the PrizePicks app in your app store and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. Now, first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with your promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, PrizePicks will give you 100 on your initial sign up. If you deposit 50, PrizePicks is going to give you $50 on your initial sign up. But remember, don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Have fun at it, man. You can do it tonight for the Monday night game. All right, we're rolling along here, man, on a bye week edition where we are actually taking a little bit of inventory and seeing what we have in terms of who we have on this team. We thank you for making us your first listen, but for your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go be beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Tony Wiggins here, hosting your daily Locked On Jaguars show, because it's your team every single day. Now, I talked about some of the complexities in adding pass rush and how you have to take inventory of what you have before you start moving along to find out what you're going to do in the offseason to improve it. The pass rush needs to improve. They're going to have to do it in a way that's helping through the draft. They're going to have to do it either re-signing their own veterans or getting some guys late in the veteran market. And they need Trayvon Walker to really, really step up and be that guy that I don't know if he's going to work with Chuck Smith or whoever in the offseason. Maybe he'll go back up and work with Robert Mathis. But whatever he needs to do, he needs to find some secondary moves to go along with his raw athleticism and his power and learn how to disengage. Even when guys are holding you, they're holding you because you got them beat. You got the leverage. You then have to figure out a way to disengage, and either by trying to disengage, you're either going to get away or you're going to prove and show to the referee who's standing right there, who should see it anyway, but he doesn't, that you're being held. I thought at this point he'd have at least 4.5, 5 sacks. And I think he's at 3.5 or 4. So the production is a little bit behind. I thought he'd have 8.5 or 9. And I thought some of them he'd get just by being able to pull some twists and run free to the quarterback. But that hasn't been happening. I think they spend too much time on the field, too, because they get tired. Because they don't get people off the field. And they've struggled a little bit against the run up the middle. That's what I want to get to, the middle. When the Jaguars made those cuts, I said, this is going to be a problem. When I looked up and they only had 2 300-pounders, and I know they went and picked up someone, a veteran, I think it was Woods from the practice squad, and elevated him. I don't think that's the answer. I think I look around at these really good teams in the league, and I see a lot of active guys, active bodies. They have their main core players, and then when they're giving those core players a blow, they got all these big 300-pound dudes just running all over the place. Just like I look and I see all these other teams with backup tight ends and backup tight. How the Chiefs got a Hall of Famer, and then they got another tight end catching touchdowns, and we don't have one that can really do that consistently. So we'll get to that position later on this week as well. But for right now, man, what it is for me is I really believe that there's going to have to be some massive improvement in the depth of the interior, in the health and the play of Fadukasi, in the play of Trayvon Walker, in the production of Josh Allen, who, by the way, since we're doing some housekeeping, if they trade Josh Allen on his 5th-year option and get something for him either at the beginning of free agency or right before the draft, that saves them $11 million in cap space. So that's one way that they can save some cap space. But if they do that, they're still going to have to find someone. Now, you go, why would you get rid of the guy and you don't know who you're going to find to replace him? My point is, why would you pay to keep a guy and not get anything for him, knowing you're not going to give him what he wants at the end of his contract? He's going to walk anyway. We have to stop holding on to dead weight. I don't think he's a terrible player. I just think he needs to be a complementary player on a team that has another guy that is already where he needs to be as a pass rusher and not a guy like Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker is already, in my opinion, better than Josh Allen. And he shouldn't be if Josh Allen is a dude that you are thinking about paying long term and he's already been in the league for 4 years. Silver lining, it doesn't all need to be blown up. You still got two big bodies in the middle. You with 52 and 94. You still got Trayvon with all of that potential. And you still have an ability to re-sign some of the other guys and keep them, especially if you let other guys go. Like, for instance, I think if they move on from Roy Robinson Harris, they may save anywhere between $5 and $7 million in cap space. In fact, I think I have it right here. Let me check that real quick. Yeah, he's only got $2.3 million in dead money, and he has a cap hit of $10 million. So you're looking at over $7 million in savings. But he was named the captain yesterday. They might like him. They might like him more than we do. And this goes back to Trent Baalke. This is Trent's decision. You can't honestly think that there's no reason to be skeptical that a guy is not going to keep the people that he handpicked. If they don't keep the people they handpicked, guess what that means? They're gonna have to find a scapegoat, and it might end up being Mike Caldwell. If it's not the players that the GM picked and the GM isn't willing to think that it's his guys, trust me, somebody's going to blame somebody. Could this be a one-and-done situation for Mike Caldwell? Don't know. Hope it isn't. But Mike has a lot down the stretch he has to prove. So what does this all mean? Why am I doing this now? It's because the next 7 weeks, I think it's an audition for guys who have to show that they're going to be here. And we got a whole bunch of them on the back end, and we'll get to them tomorrow. Because I'm going to do the linebackers and the DBs tomorrow before I get to the offense. These next 7 games are an audition. Now, there's probably the minority of the people out there that go, well, I don't want them to play well. I want them to lose so we can get a high draft pick. Yeah, what you want to give them a high draft pick so they can take Will Anderson, who already plays a position where you've already filled it. Now, Jalen Carter makes sense. But this is what you don't want. You don't want this dilemma where you're sitting at the top of the draft and the guys that are at the top of the draft they play positions where you've already penciled somebody in to be in those spots. And I know you say, the hell with it, get them. Yeah, but it doesn't, like I said, you cannot allocate so much money and so many resources to one position. It's just totally counterintuitive because you're not going to be able to move around at the other positions the way you want to. If you're going to overpay at one position, then you better be overachieving at other positions. And you better have guys on rookie contracts that are playing well at other positions. It's the same reason you wouldn't pick a quarterback right now. You just can't do it. Doesn't make sense. It's the same reason you wouldn't take a running back in the first 2 rounds right now, even though you probably do need another guy. And I know everybody's saying, well, we just traded a guy. Well, once again, they traded a guy that had no interest in re-signing. These are the dilemmas. These are the things that we have to talk about. The next 7 games, just watch this offensive line win intent. Listen to this before the game on Sunday. Break it down. You can take a segment from each day and say, I want to pay attention moving forward to who is playing like they deserve to be on this team. And if they don't, we're going to move on from them. And when we move on from them, then we can start formulating a plan of who we're going to get to replace them. Make sure you tune in to Locked On Jaguars podcast every single day because it's your team every day. We love the fact that you make us our first listen. We're going to do these back 7 guys tomorrow. We'll get to some offense later on in the week during bye week. Until tomorrow, you guys take care of each other and tune in again to Locked On Jaguars.